Ethan's alarm doesn't go off. He wakes up on his own at 5:40 in the morning in a house that cost less than the apartment he used to rent in the city. The ceiling fan turns slow circles above him. He doesn't check his phone first thing. He used to. Now there's nothing urgent enough to chase before the sun's even up. He gets up, makes coffee in a machine that's older than his last relationship, and stands at the kitchen window watching his neighbor wax a car that costs more than Ethan's entire investment portfolio did 6 years ago. The neighbor waves. Ethan waves back. Neither of them knows the other's number. That's the whole point. Here's what nobody in this neighborhood knows about the guy in the modest gray sedan with the faded paint. Ethan hasn't had a job in 14 months. Not because he got laid off, because he doesn't need one. He wakes up when he wants, works a few hours a week, consulting for a company he used to work full-time for, and the rest of his day belongs to him. He drives a car worth 12 grand. He owns his home outright. He has more money working for him right now, quietly, in the background, than most people around him will make in the next decade combined. You would never guess it. That's exactly how he built it. Rewind 8 years. Ethan is 27, sitting in a leased BMW in a parking garage, staring at a notification on his phone that makes his stomach drop. Credit card decline, $31. At a gas station, he tries a second card. It goes through barely. He's an account manager making $62,000 a year, which sounds like plenty until you look at where it actually goes. $640 a month for the car, another $200 for insurance on that car, because leased BMWs don't come cheap to insure. A downtown apartment he can't really afford, chosen because the address sounded like something. Dinners out 3 nights a week, because showing up to brunch in something other than a fresh outfit felt somehow like losing. He's got $3,200 in credit card debt, less than $1,000 saved, nothing invested, nothing growing. Every dollar he earns is already spent before it lands, chasing the appearance of a life he hasn't actually built yet. He tells himself it's temporary. He tells himself once the promotion comes, once the raise hits, it'll all balance out. He believes, the way a lot of smart people believe, that leverage is confidence, and confidence is currency. He isn't stupid. He isn't reckless. He's doing what he's watched everyone around him do his entire adult life. Spend now, worry later, and call it momentum. The thing that finally cracks that belief isn't a financial disaster. It's a conversation. Ethan meets Walter through his job, servicing the account of a small manufacturing company Walter sold off years earlier but still keeps an office at, mostly out of habit. Walter is 74. He drives a Toyota that's older than some of Ethan's co-workers. He wears the same 3 shirts on rotation. If you passed him on the street, you would not look twice. One afternoon, waiting on paperwork, Ethan asks him, half joking, if he ever thinks about retiring properly, traveling, buying something nice, finally living it up. Walter looks at him for a second too long before answering, I did all my living up already, just not the way you're picturing it. Ethan laughs it off. Walter doesn't. He just goes back to his paperwork, and the comment sits there, unresolved, the way the important ones always do. A few weeks later, Ethan mentions, trying to sound casual, that he just upgraded his lease to a newer model. Walter asks him one question. You own that car or does the bank? Ethan says it's basically his. Walter says there's no basically in ownership. You either own it or you're renting the feeling of owning it. That line does something to Ethan that 100 motivational videos never managed. It doesn't inspire him, it exposes him. Over the following months, in small conversations, Walter keeps dropping lines like that. Never a lecture, never a sales pitch on frugality, just quiet observations that land like stones dropped into still water. Rich is what people see. Wealthy is what you don't have to show anyone. Debt is just spending your future paycheck today with interest for the privilege. Nobody ever went broke owning something. Plenty of people went broke trying to look like they did. Ethan starts noticing things about Walter he hadn't before. Walter doesn't talk about money. Walter doesn't need to. Walter has options or keys. He can say no to things. He can walk away from a bad deal without blinking because nothing is riding on that one deal. Ethan starts to understand that the difference between Walter and every flashy person Ethan has ever admired isn't the number in the bank account. It's what that number lets you refuse. Ethan doesn't overhaul his life overnight. He can't. Nobody does. Instead, he makes one small, almost boring decision. He sets up an automatic transfer, $150 every payday, into a basic index fund. That's it. No dramatic haircut to his lifestyle. No big announcement. Just $150 redirected before he can spend it on something that looks good in a photo. It feels like nothing. $150 a paycheck doesn't buy a car or a vacation or a story to tell at dinner. For the first year, his brokerage balance barely moves the needle compared to what his co-workers are spending on watches and weekend trips. He questions it constantly. He watches a co-worker lease a new truck and feels that old, familiar itch of falling behind. But he doesn't cancel the transfer. He keeps it running. He pays off the $3,200 in credit card debt, slowly, aggressively, targeting the highest interest rate first, understanding for the first time, that debt at 22% interest is a guaranteed loss no investment can outrun. He downgrades the lease to a used car, paid in cash, and feels an unexpected relief the first time a car payment doesn't hit his account. 2 years pass, then 3. The automatic transfer becomes something he doesn't even think about, like a bill he pays to his own future. He gets a raise, and instead of upgrading his apartment, he increases the transfer. He gets a bonus, and instead of a trip, half goes into the account and half goes toward actually enjoying his life. Because Walter never told him to suffer. Walter told him to choose on purpose instead of by accident. The first real result comes quietly, the way most real results do. Ethan checks his account one evening and sees a number he doesn't recognize as his own, $50,000. Not from one big win, not from a bonus or an inheritance, from 4 years of unglamorous, repeated, boring decisions compounding on top of each other while he wasn't looking too closely. He doesn't tell anyone. That's new for him too. The old Ethan would have found a way to mention it at a dinner. This Ethan just sits with it, feeling something steadier than pride, something closer to safety. Then the market falls apart. It happens over a few brutal months. A downturn nobody saw coming with that kind of speed, the kind that makes financial news anchors use words like unprecedented and historic. Ethan watches his account, the one he built for 4 years, drop by nearly a third in a matter of weeks. Numbers that took years to build evaporate on a screen in real time. His hands actually shake the first time he opens the app and sees the balance. Every instinct in his body says sell, get out, protect what's left. He remembers a co-worker from years ago who did exactly that during a smaller dip, and Ethan remembers how that co-worker never fully recovered because he sold at the bottom and never got back in before the market climbed again. He calls Walter, half panicked, expecting reassurance or maybe a strategy. Walter doesn't give him either. Walter says, "You planted a tree, you don't dig it up to check if the roots are working." Ethan doesn't sell. He does something harder. He keeps the automatic transfer running, buying more shares at lower prices while his stomach is in knots, understanding that pulling out now would lock in a loss that time alone might have healed. He knows there are no guarantees the market will recover on any particular timeline, and he sits with that uncertainty instead of pretending it away. Over the following 2 years, the market not only recovers, it moves past where it had been. Ethan's account, boosted by all the shares he bought cheap during the downturn, doesn't just return to where it was. It surges past it in ways that feel almost unfair compared to how frightening those months had felt in real time. This is where the real shift happens. Not in the dramatic crash, but in the slow, unglamorous years afterward, where the same small, repeated decision, held for nearly a decade now, starts to behave less like savings and more like a second income that never asks for a day off. Compound growth doesn't announce itself, it just quietly does more work every year than the year before, on the same effort Ethan put in when the number was small enough to ignore. None of this is guaranteed, and Ethan knows it. Markets can move against you for reasons entirely outside your control, but showing up consistently gave him more chances for the math to work in his favor than any single bet ever could have. By the time Ethan is 35, something has changed that he almost doesn't notice until it happens. His company offers him a promotion, more money, more prestige, a title his younger self would have chased across the country for. And Ethan says no, not because the job is bad, because he doesn't want it. And for the first time in his life, he realizes he can actually afford to mean that. He isn't trapped by a car payment or a lease or a lifestyle that needs feeding. He has enough distance from his own bills that a no doesn't feel like a risk. It feels like a choice. That's the moment he understands what Walter had been trying to tell him all along. Wealth was never about the car in the driveway or the address on the lease. It was about the ability to say no to things you don't actually want without your whole life falling apart because of it. It costs him something, though. Old friends stop understanding him. They see the modest car, the paid-off house, the fact that he doesn't chase promotions anymore, and some of them read it as him giving up, or falling behind, or losing his edge. A few distance themselves. It stings more than he expects, not because he thinks he's better than them, but because he genuinely misses the closeness they used to have, back when their definitions of success still matched. He doesn't correct them. He doesn't need them to understand. He just lets the distance be what it is, quietly, the same way Walter always let his own quiet be misread as nothing special. Which brings us back to that morning. Ethan, standing at his kitchen window, watching his neighbor wax a car worth more than Ethan's entire portfolio once was. The coffee machine that's older than his last relationship. The grey sedan with the faded paint parked in the driveway, paid for in full, insured for almost nothing, going nowhere important today because there's nowhere he has to be. The difference is, this time, you know what that stillness actually costs and what it actually bought. Not luck, not a windfall, $150 a paycheck, an aggressive payoff of bad debt, a decision not to sell during the worst months of his financial life, and years of looking from the outside exactly like nothing was happening at all. The goal was never to look rich. Ethan understands that now, in a way, he couldn't have at 27 staring at a declined card in a leased car he didn't own. The goal was to become free enough that nobody's opinion of his car, his house, or his title could touch the actual architecture of his life. So here's the question worth sitting with. If nobody could see your bank account, your investments, or your debt, just the car you drive and the things you own, would people still think you're winning? And if the answer makes you uncomfortable, what's one purchase in your life right now that's paid for by status instead of by freedom? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what it is.